London. They have the same shock of blindingly blonde and slightly disheveled hair. They grew up in the same hyper-competitive, overachieving family that held dinner table debates where cleverness was the coin of the realm. They were on opposite sides of the 2016 Brexit referendum but patched things up afterward, as the right sort of people do. In short, the brothers Johnson, Boris and Joe, always had each other's back. Until Thursday, anyway, when Joe Johnson announced his resignation, both from his seat in the British Parliament and from the Conservative government that his brother leads. His resignation, coming near the end of a disastrous week for his brother, Prime Minister Boris Johnson, seemed timed to inflict maximum pain. It felt Shakespearean, even Freudian, but in the end it may have been a simple act of conscience. In recent weeks I've been torn between family loyalty and the national interest, Joe Johnson, 47, wrote in a Twitter post. It's an unresolvable tension and time for others to take on my roles as MP and Minister. The resignation punctuated what has been, by some measures, one of the most miserable starts ever for a British Prime Minister, with the government losing at least 4 votes in Parliament, surrendering control of the legislative agenda and driving a wedge through the Conservative Party by purging lawmakers who broke with the government in votes this week. We profiled Boris Johnson's clan a few months ago. For them, blood was thicker than political conviction. At an appearance in Yorkshire on Thursday, the Prime Minister, 55, brushed aside suggestions of a family feud, describing his brother as a fantastic guy and praising his work as a minister. Joe doesn't agree with me about the European Union, because it's an issue that obviously divides families and divides everybody. People close to the family say that Joe, who has always been on the more pragmatic and pro-European wing of the Conservative Party, had been growing increasingly uncomfortable in his brother's government as it swung more forcefully in the direction of a no-deal Brexit, an abrupt separation from the European Union without a deal to guide future relations. But it was the expulsion of the moderate lawmakers, they say, that put him over the edge. Still, close observers doubt he was deliberately trying to embarrass or undermine his brother. He's extremely loyal to Boris, but obviously they deeply disagree with each other over Europe, said Andrew Gimson, author of The Adventures of Boris Johnson. I don't think it is Shakespearean, although there is a deep difference. Younger and more cerebral than his bombastic brother, Joe followed a similar career path to the Prime Minister's, but they are not at all the same person, Mr. Gimson said. In a family that features 2 reality television regulars, his journalist sister, Rachel, and his father, Stanley, he is decidedly lower key. Joe is totally different from Boris, Mr. Gimson said. He doesn't generally seek publicity, whereas Boris always wants to be at the center of everything. But the younger brother did seem to have some of the ambition gene passed on by Stanley Johnson, 79, an environmental campaigner and former European Union official. A one-time journalist and Paris correspondent for the Financial Times, Joe never made the mark of his noisier brother, whose entertaining but never reliably accurate articles for the Daily Telegraph took on the European Union. But the family resemblance was instantly recognizable, and he sometimes bridled when asked whether he was related to Boris. In an intensely competitive family, Joe was more academically successful than his flamboyant elder brother. Both men attended Britannia's most famous and elite school, Eton College and then Oxford University, but Joe secured a first-class degree, realizing for himself one of the thwarted ambitions of his brother, who just missed out on one. According to one version of events, after Joe won the degree, it was left to Rachel, 54, to inform Boris. Have you heard the bad news about Joe? She is said to have asked. While their father engendered fierce competition among the siblings, they all seemed to get along despite philosophical differences over the biggest issue of the day, until now, at least. Writing on Twitter, Rachel, who has also supported calls for a second referendum, said that the family avoids the topic of Brexit, especially at meals, as we don't want to gang up on the PM. This was not the first time Joe resigned from a Conservative government. Even though he had campaigned for Remain in the 2016 referendum, he joined Prime Minister Theresa May's team with the intention of delivering a sound Brexit. But he quit in disgust last fall, accusing Mrs. May of offering Britons a choice between a vassalage and chaos, and arguing that only a second referendum would get the country out of the morass. A Brexit has divided the country, he wrote in his resignation letter. It has divided political parties. And it has divided families, too. He then devoted himself to a campaign for a second referendum. By the time Boris announced his candidacy for the Conservative Party leadership, their differences had been swept under the family rug. And when Boris won the top job, he gave Joe a ministerial position with responsibility for universities and science that granted him the right to attend cabinet meetings, though without full cabinet status. At the time Joe signed on, his father said he was fully committed. Joe Johnson will support the line of the government, Stanley Johnson told reporters at a breakfast meeting. Joe Johnson is a very, very clever man, the father added, playing down suggestions that the family was becoming a high-profile British clan akin to the Kennedys or, God forbid, the Kardashians. From time to time we meet down in Somerset where I have had a farm since 1951, but we certainly don't try to get an agreed position. Not in this case anyway. In broader terms, Joe's resignation underscores the dismay with which moderate conservatives have reacted to the Prime Minister's brutal tactics. His culling of rebel lawmakers from the party underscored the Prime Minister's determination to transform the Conservatives into a party prepared to adopt the hardest and most aggressive form of Brexit, an ambition Joe apparently felt he could not abide. If the episode proves one thing, it is that sibling rivalries can be perilous in the often incestuous world of British politics. When Ed Miliband stood against his elder brother David for the leadership of the Labour Party in 2010, it tore the family apart. At the time, Boris had some harsh words for the Miliband brothers. We don't do things that way, that's a very left-wing thing, he said, comparing the Johnsons to the Milibands. Only a socialist could do that to his brother. Only a socialist could regard familial ties as being so trivial as to shaft his own brother. Only lefties can think like that, he said. They see people as discrete agents devoid of ties to society or to each other, and thought how Stalin could murder 20 million people.